My name is Savannah. I am 18. And the day I graduated, I learned that freedom looks exactly like a desolate gas station in the Nevada heat. You would think the most humbling part is being left behind. You would be wrong. The most humbling part is your mother not even unlocking the car doors. April rolled down the window just enough to slide a manila envelope through. It contained $120. Good luck out there, she said, chewing her gum like she was bored. Then she rolled the window up. The car turned onto the highway and shrank into a speck of dust. I stood there holding a backpack that weighed less than the silence they left behind. This was not a gap year. It was an erasure. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community. I did not cry. I did not chase the car. Tears are a luxury for people who have a safety net, and I had exactly $120 and a backpack full of high school textbooks. I walked into the gas station, bought a bottle of water and a map, and asked the clerk for the nearest truck stop. Panic tried to claw its way up my throat, but I swallowed it down. Panic is expensive. Action is free. 2 hours later, I was in the cab of a semi-truck hauling rebar to the Rust Belt. I did not choose the destination. The driver did. He was going to Pittsburgh, so I was going to Pittsburgh. I watched the desert fade into the plains, then into the gray industrial sprawl of the east. I deleted my parents' numbers from my phone somewhere in Nebraska. It was not an act of anger. It was an act of efficiency. They had canceled my subscription to their lives, so I was closing the account. The city smelled like sulfur-wet pavement and old money that had rusted over. I did not look for a shelter. I looked for work. I found my way to the industrial district where the buildings were skeletons of brick and iron standing like monuments to a harder time. That was where I found Gary. He was running a scrapyard that looked more like a graveyard for giants' piles of twisted steel reaching toward the smoggy sky. He looked at my shoes, which were already falling apart, and then at my hands. "You ever worked a day in your life?" he asked. I looked him in the eye. "I learned fast," I said. It was not a plea. It was a contract offer. I traded 12 hours of hard labor a day for a cot in the corner of the drafty warehouse and $18 an hour under the table. The air in the foundry tasted like copper and ozone. My hands, once soft from holding textbooks and trying to be the daughter they wanted, turned rough and gray. I swept metal shavings until my palms bled, then I wrapped them in duct tape and swept some more. I sorted scrap. I hauled iron. I watched Gary weld. I watched how he took jagged, useless pieces of debris and fused them into something unbreakable. I saw the sparks fly like captured stars, and I felt the heat on my face searing away the girl who had stood at that bus stop. One night, after everyone had left, I picked up the torch. The heat was terrifying, but it was also clarifying. I realized then that my parents had done me a favor. They thought they were discarding trash, but they were actually sending raw material to the forge. Soft wood rots. It warps under pressure. It tries to bend to fit the shape of the house. But steel endures. Steel remembers the fire. I stopped counting the days since they left. I stopped waiting for a phone call that would never come. I focused on the physics of the arc, the pool of molten metal, the absolute certainty of the weld. I was not just surviving. I was hardening. I was becoming something cold, sharp, and useful. I was becoming something they would never be able to break again. Sometimes when the white-hot arc of the welding torch blinded me, I would see the afterimage of my childhood dining room. It was the polar opposite of the foundry. The foundry was chaotic, loud, and honest. My parents' house was a museum of silence. The carpets were vacuumed into perfect geometric lines that we were afraid to step on. The windows were always closed to keep out the dust. April and Joseph did not build a home. They curated a set. My sister Sarah was the centerpiece of that collection. She was the golden child, a porcelain doll kept on a shelf too high to reach. She never had a hair out of place, never brought home a grade lower than an A, and never ever spoke above a whisper. To the outside world, she was the proof of their parenting genius. But I saw the way her hands shook when she spilled a drop of water. I saw the panic in her eyes when she did not know the right answer. She was perfect, which meant she was trapped. She was not allowed to be human. I was different. I was the stain on the rug. I was the noise in the library. I was the one who asked why we pretended to be rich when the credit card bills were pink with overdue notices. I was the one who pointed out that Joseph drank his evening tea from a flask. I was not bad. I was just the truth teller, and in a house built on lies, the truth is an act of war. For years, I thought there was something wrong with me. I thought I was defective. But working with steel taught me about structural integrity, and it taught me about load distribution. I finally understood the mechanics of what they had done to me. It is a concept I later learned is called the scapegoat mechanism. A toxic family operates like a pressurized engine. It generates shame, insecurity, and rage the way an engine generates heat. That heat has to go somewhere or the whole system explodes. Sarah could not take it. She was the paint job, the shiny exterior. April and Joseph certainly would not take it. They were the operators. So they needed a heat sink. They needed a ventilation shaft. That was me. I was the vessel they poured their failures into. If Joseph lost a client, it was because I was too loud in the morning and ruined his focus. If April felt old and faded, it was because I was difficult to raise. They needed me to be the problem. As long as I was the disaster, they could remain the victims. As long as I was the chaos, they could pretend to be the order. That day at the gas station, they did not just drive away. They made a tactical error. They thought they were throwing away a piece of trash, but they were actually removing the only thing keeping their family together. By leaving, I did not just escape. I broke their machine. I capped the exhaust pipe. Without me there to absorb the poison, I knew it would only be a matter of time before the pressure built up, before the heat turned inward, and before they started burning each other alive. 13 years is enough time for iron to rust into dust, but it is also enough time to polish it until it shines like silver. I am 31 now. The girl who slept on a cot in the corner of a warehouse is gone, replaced by a woman who owns the building. Gary retired 4 years ago, and I bought the foundry with a single cashier's check. I kept the name, but I changed the clientele. I am no longer fixing broken fences. I am the welder, an anonymous industrial artist whose sculptures, twisted beams of recovered wreckage reborn, as high art installations sell for 6 figures to galleries in New York and London. I wear tailored suits now, though I still prefer steel-toed boots. I have a penthouse overlooking the city, a portfolio of investments, and Alexander. He is an architect, a man who understands that beauty is nothing without structural integrity. He looks at me and sees the load-bearing walls I have built around my heart, and instead of trying to break them down, he reinforces them. He respects the design, but there is a secret about survival that no one tells you. You can leave the desert, you can leave the poverty, but the poverty does not always leave you. It is an invisible chain that keeps you tethered to the moment you are discarded. I still wake up at 5 in the morning, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The sheets are high thread count Egyptian cotton, but for a split second my body thinks it is back on that lumpy cot shivering in the draft. I grab my phone before I even breathe. I open my banking app. I stare at the balance. $3,420,000. I read the numbers out loud. I have to see them. I have to hear them. My brain knows I am safe. My nervous system does not. It is still waiting for the other shoe to drop. It is still waiting for April to roll down the window and ask for her $120 back. I walk through my foundry, running my hands over the cold steel of my latest commission just to make sure it is real. I feel the phantom weight of that high school backpack digging into my shoulders, pulling me down, whispering that I am one mistake away from being nothing again. Alexander finds me sometimes standing in the dark at 4 in the morning, staring at a welding rig like it is a lifeline. He does not tell me to go back to sleep. He does not tell me I am being irrational. He hands me a cup of coffee and stands with me in the silence. He knows that I am not just looking at machinery. I am looking at the only thing that stands between me and the abyss. I am wealthy, I am powerful, and I am terrified. The world sees a success story. I see a woman who is always prepared to run. I keep a bag packed in the trunk of my car, just in case. Because when you are forged in fire, you never quite trust the cold. You always expect the heat to come back. And as it turned out, I was right. The heat was coming. The envelope arrived at my agent's office on a Tuesday morning. It was heavy cream-colored cardstock with gold leaf lettering, the kind of stationery that screams old money to cover up the silence of new debt. My agent, a sharp-eyed woman named Elena, who handled the business side of the welder persona, tossed it onto my desk like it was a grenade. "You might want to see this," she said. "Michelle has been blowing up my phone for weeks. She says she snagged the white whale for her clients." I picked it up. The embossing felt rough under my thumb. The April and Joseph Foundation requests the honor of the welder at a charity gala and family reunion. Below that, in smaller pretentious script, celebrating the bonds that build us. I stared at the names. April, Joseph, my parents. The irony was so thick I could taste it. It tasted like bile. They were hosting a gala to celebrate family bonds. the same people who had severed their bond with me for $120. But they were not inviting Savannah, the daughter they left in the desert. They were inviting the welder, the anonymous industrial artist, whose net worth was rumored to be in the 8 figures. They did not know. They had absolutely no idea that the mystery billionaire Michelle was bragging about securing was the girl they had erased. They were not looking for a lost child. They were hunting for a wallet. They wanted a donor to anchor their event, someone to lend credibility to whatever facade they were constructing this time. I felt a laugh bubble up in my chest, but it was not a happy sound. It was cold and metallic. They had spent 13 years pretending I did not exist, and now they were practically begging for my presence. It was the ultimate transactional betrayal. My absence was necessary for their image back then, but my money was necessary for their image now. Alexander walked in, saw my face, and took the invitation from my hand. He read it once, his expression hardening. He did not tell me to burn it. He did not tell me to ignore it. He understands the architecture of trauma better than anyone. He knows you cannot just pave over a sinkhole. You have to fill it in. You have to go, he said quietly. I looked at him. Why? To let them humiliate me again. No, he said. To close the account. You have been waiting for the other shoe to drop for 13 years, Savannah. This is it. They dropped it. Now you get to decide if you pick it up or kick it aside. You aren't walking in there as their victim. You are walking in there as the one thing they worship more than their own reflection. You are walking in as the money. He was right. If I stayed away, I would always wonder. I would always be the scared girl checking her bank account at 5 a.m. But if I went, if I walked into their trap and triggered the spring myself, I could dismantle the mechanism once and for all. I looked at the RSVP card. It asked for a donation tier: platinum, gold, or silver. I picked up a pen. I did not check a box. I just wrote my acceptance. I was not going to donate a cent. I was going to donate a reality check. I told Elena to confirm my attendance. Tell Michelle her mystery guest is coming, I said. Tell her I will be arriving in a limo. Tell her I expect the VIP treatment. I was not going to a reunion. I was going to an inspection. I needed to see the structural integrity of the life they had built without me. I needed to see if it was strong or if it was just painted rust. I did not buy a dress immediately. I bought information. In my line of work, you never weld a joint until you know the composition of the metal, and I needed to know exactly what I was walking into. I hired a private investigator, a former forensic accountant who specialized in corporate fraud. I gave him the names April, Joseph, Sarah, and the newly minted foundation. The report arrived on my desk 48 hours before the gala. It was thick, heavy, and damning. As I turned the pages, the last remnants of my childhood guilt evaporated like mist in a furnace. The April and Joseph Foundation was a shell. It was not registered as a 501c3 nonprofit. It had no board of directors, no mission statement, and no history of giving. It was a personal bank account dressed up in a tuxedo. But the real horror story was in their personal finances. They were destitute. The pristine house I grew up in, the Museum of Silence, was mortgaged 3 times over. They were drowning in 7 figures of debt. They had leveraged everything: the cars, the furniture, the reputation. And Sarah, the golden child, she was the primary casualty. The report showed that Sarah's credit score had been decimated. There were loans taken out in her name that were currently in default. They had cannibalized her. Without me there to act as the heat sink, the toxic pressure of their lifestyle had turned inward, and they had devoured the very child they claimed to protect. Sarah was not a partner in this. She was a hostage, financially ruined and trapped in their web of appearances. This was not a reunion. It was not even a charity event. It was a Ponzi scheme. They were hosting this gala to solicit donations from wealthy investors, money that would never go to a cause, but would go straight to the banks to stop the foreclosure for another few months. They were financial predators standing on the edge of a cliff, looking for someone to grab onto so they would not fall alone. I closed the file. The anger I felt was not hot. It was absolute zero. I had spent 13 years wondering if I was the one who was broken, if I was the one who lacked value, but the math was right there in black and white. They were the ones with no value. They were a Potemkin village, a beautiful painted facade with nothing behind it but rot and desperation. Attending this party was not a risk anymore. It was a mercy killing. If I did not go, they might trap some other unsuspecting investor. They might drag someone else down with them. By showing up, I was not just closing my own account. I was foreclosing on their entire operation. I picked up my phone and called Alexander. I told him to have the car ready. I told him to wear his best suit. I went to my closet and pulled out a dress I had commissioned months ago, a structured piece of architectural fashion, sharp angles and shimmering fabric that looked like liquid mercury. It was armor. I was not going to save them. I was not going to bail them out. I was going to be the mirror they could finally no longer avoid. They wanted the welder. They were going to get her. And they were going to learn that you cannot forge gold out of rust. The limo was black, sleek, and silent. As we rolled up the long rented driveway of the estate they had secured for the night, I saw them. April and Joseph were standing by the entrance, their smiles tight, their eyes scanning every arriving car with the desperation of starving animals. They looked the same, yet diminished. The polish was chipping, the facade was cracking. The driver opened my door. I stepped out my mercury dress, catching the floodlights. Alexander stepped out beside me, a pillar of calm. Michelle, the event planner, spotted us instantly. "The welder is here," she whispered loudly, ushering my parents forward. April and Joseph rushed toward us. Their eyes didn't meet mine. They went straight to the diamond tennis bracelet on my wrist, then to the cut of Alexander's suit. They were calculating our net worth before they even said hello. "Welcome," Joseph said, extending a hand that trembled slightly. "We are so honored you could join our little family gathering to support the cause." "We have heard so much about your work," April added, her voice, a sickly sweet octave higher than I remembered. She thrust a glossy brochure into my hands. "We have different tiers of support tonight. Platinum donors get a plaque in the garden." I looked at the brochure. I looked at the desperate greed in their eyes. Then I reached up and took off my sunglasses. I waited. 1 second. 2 seconds. Joseph frowned. The smile faltered on April's face. She squinted, leaning in closer. Then the color drained out of her skin so fast she looked like a corpse. "Savannah," she whispered. The word sounded like she was choking on a bone. Joseph took a step back, nearly tripping over his own feet. "No, that is impossible." "It has been 13 years, I said. My voice was not loud. It was steel. "You look tired, Joseph." You are the welder," April stammered, her eyes darting around to see if anyone was watching. "But how?" "Labor," I said. "And the $120 you gave me. I invested it." I reached into my clutch. I pulled out a single crisp bill. I held it out to April. "Here," I said. $100. I kept the 20 for interest. Consider my debt paid." April stared at the bill. She didn't take it. Her hands were shaking too hard. "Savannah, please," she hissed. "Not here. We can explain. We always knew you would make something of yourself. We did it to make you strong." I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, like a hammer hitting an anvil. "You did it because you are weak," I said. "I know about the debt. I know about Sarah. I know this foundation is a fraud." Joseph lunged forward, grabbing my arm. "You ungrateful little, you can't say that here. You have to help us. We are your family." Alexander stepped in, removing Joseph's hand from my arm with a grip that made my father wince. "She doesn't have to do anything," Alexander said calmly. "And she is not your family. She is your consequence." I dropped the $100 bill. It fluttered to the ground, landing on Joseph's polished shoe. "Goodbye, April. Goodbye, Joseph," I said. I turned around. I got back into the limo. Alexander slid in beside me. "Drive," I told the driver. We didn't look back. As we pulled away, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel anger. I felt light. The phantom backpack was gone. The invisible chain had snapped. Back at the foundry, I stood in the center of the floor, the smell of ozone and cooling metal filling my lungs. Alexander handed me a glass of water. "Did you burn it down?" he asked. "No," I said. "I didn't have to. They are already burning. I just refused to be the water." I looked at my welding rig. For years, I thought I was building sculptures to prove them wrong. I thought I was building a fortress to keep them out. But standing there in the empire I had forged with my own 2 hands, I realized the truth. The best revenge isn't destruction. It isn't screaming or suing or watching them suffer. The justice of the sower is simple. You plant your own garden. You tend your own soil. And when the harvest comes, you realize that the people who starved you are not qualified to sit at your table. I pulled down my welding mask. I sparked the torch. The blue flame hissed to life, bright and hot and pure. I wasn't fixing the past anymore. I was building the future. If this story reminded you that your value is defined by you, not them, please share this video. And tell me in the comments, What is the one thing you built for yourself that no one can take away?